after this. Services that let investors make bets on events like elections often prove uncannily accurate. Now, for the first time, bookmaker Intrade is offering tax futures, a way to hedge against any future move of tax rates in America. Will it be as accurate? Jason Raspini is a hedge fund analyst who helped create the concept. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Why don't we start with what made you come up with this idea? I mean, obviously there's bookmaking on just about everything. This has never been done before. Why did you want to do it?
Yeah, well, this sort of thing has always interested me, and it's kind of a logical progression. I mean, commodities trading, futures trading started so that commodity producers and buyers could hedge their exposure. And then in the 70s, it extended to currencies and interest rates, and then more recently, housing and real estate. And I think this is the next step. I think this is the biggest unhedged risk that most people have, future legislation and taxes. So I think this is going to be a huge market in 10 years.
So, Jason, tell us how this works. How do you construct a contract to bet on what the government will do vis-a-vis taxes?
Well, basically, it's a binary option. It's a ladder of binary options. And so if you think that taxes are going to be higher than, say, 36%, you buy an option, and if it's trading at, say, at 40, that means there's a 40%, an implied 40% probability that taxes will be above 36%. If they are, in fact, above 36% on expiration, the option expires at 100. If not, it expires at 0. So, you know, we put a lot of thought into structuring this to kind of maximize liquidity, and
Jason,
we also put a lot of thought in.
Sorry, when you talk about taxes,
Sure.
are you talking the federal tax rate, right? You're not talking
yes,
federal,
exactly.
state, municipal, just the federal tax rate, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going in. We
Okay.
put a lot of thought into structuring the rules of the contract, and we want to target the highest federal marginal single filer rate, and we think that's going to be a good proxy for effective rates. And obviously, a lot of other things go into the effective rate, like the Social Security cap and AMT and that sort of thing. And at some point, we're going to spin off those markets.
So obviously this has started, I think, about a week ago. What kind of interest have you seen in these futures?
Well, obviously they're not Eurodollars yet, but I've started markets before, and I'm pretty pleased, I have to tell you, with what I've seen in just 1 week. I see market makers coming in the past couple of days, and the markets are really starting to thicken up. And I really think this is going to be Intrade's biggest market in 2009.
Now, Jason, would this work for companies as well, or is this strictly designed for individuals?
That's a good question, and we are going to have corporate tax rates at some point as well. As soon as these markets get going and get liquid and start trading actively, I think we'll extend these to the corporate tax rates, and also all sorts of legislation, theoretically, industry subsidy legislation, and that sort of thing.
We've seen them be accurate. I mean, most recently we saw them be accurate predicting the upset for Obama in the primaries. In terms of how that is linked, the outcome of the federal election, of course, the race for the presidency, is sort of tied to this, since we don't know whether or not the Bush tax cuts will be made permanent. Are they going to be linked? Will they trade off each other?
Certainly. If Democrats win the White House and retain both houses of Congress, the future tax rates will be projected to go much higher. And that's actually, if you're a market maker and you're accumulating short tax exposure, that's a good way for you to actually hedge that exposure, just going long the Democrats, and maintaining kind of a balanced book.
The tax cuts that Bush put in place, they expire in 2011, so that's theoretically what you're talking about,
That's right?
You're betting what's going to happen after 2011.
That's definitely going to be the most contentious year here. And right now, the futures are showing 86% of Bush tax cuts not being extended in 2011. And they're actually suggesting that they may increase before 2011, which is a little surprising to me when I set up the futures.
So let's talk about some of the regulatory issues. Are there any potential issues with this kind of a system?
Oh, certainly, the regulatory environment is ambiguous, to say the least. And people should really, listeners should know what their federal and their local laws are and follow them. I know in New York State we have what they call the predominant factor test, which means that if a game is primarily skill-based, it's not considered gambling. So in that sense, I think this would be okay, even though I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving advice. And also, you should, of course, report any winnings to the IRS.
What if the government does something sneaky, though, Jason, which we all know governments are capable of, and certainly the government in this province did? They introduced something, they don't call it a tax, they call it a premium or a surtax or something else. How do you cope with something like that?
Oh, definitely. These contracts are hard enough to structure for just mundane kind of events. But when you have a whole complex entity out there that might be reacting to how you're structuring the contracts, that is challenging, and that's something that I'm thinking about, and I think I'll be able to stay on top of this. I don't think it's something that's going to sneak up on me. I'm going to stay in touch with the news and what's going on Capitol Hill, and I think I'll be able to stay out in front of it and be able to basically spin off contracts if it looks like there's a development that's going to somehow disrupt the operation of these contracts. I think I'll be able to stay out in front of that and spin off a new contract and move liquidity over to that new contract.
All right, and so for those that want to do it, where do they go? Intrade.com?
Intrade.com, and there'll be instructions there in terms of depositing money and that sort of thing. It's a really easy interface.
Thanks, Jason. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Jason
Thanks so much.
Raspini, hedge fund analyst. Coming up, when you try to cut the fat,